Hey, hi, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Emma. I love all things theater, and today I wanted to talk about the new documentary, Liza, a truly terrific, absolutely true story. Which, of course, if you're a fan of Liza Minnelli, unlike some people, I'll get into that later, you would know that that was the intro into the song Ring Them Bells that she performed at her performance of Liza with a Z. I have been obsessed with this woman ever since I was a bebe. One of my favorite things actually is the fact that I have the full-length A&E biography of Liza Minnelli on here. I was obsessed watching this. So when I heard that there was a new documentary coming out about her, I was like, finally, yes please. Let's go. This was directed by Bruce David Klein, who actually also directed the Merrily We Roll Along documentary, so I was really happy to hear that he was a part of that team. And kind of the general theme of the documentary is kind of more focused on like the people around her during her career in the 70s, since that's kind of like was when she became the global superstar that we know today. So after watching it, I kind of wanted to give a little review about it and share my thoughts, and also to hear what you guys think about the documentary if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, let me know in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive on into it. So the beginning prologue of the film, they end up showing you an image of red sequins with Over the Rainbow playing behind it, and you also hear bits of audio clips of Liza speaking with her mother at certain concerts that they did together, and then immediately shifts into the funeral of Liza's mother, the one and only Judy Garland. If you don't know who Judy Garland is, then I don't know how to help you. It was really wild watching that footage over again. I haven't seen like the Judy Garland memorial service in a while, but the fact that like thousands of people showed up, and it wasn't just a mix of people paying their respects. It was like kind of people like ogling and gawking. There was a part of it that felt genuine and lovely, but at the same time, just a little bit grody. The tabloids, the gossipers are just trying to get one more ounce of juicy gossip from this whole thing. I don't know if that made sense. Liza ends up saying that she was in full denial that her mother was ever gonna die, really. When she found out the news that her mother did pass, she cried for 8 days straight. She felt overwhelmed, like she definitely had like a lot of responsibility as the oldest child. Mia Farrow, her friend, which is like so wild to even say. They had known each other since the 50s. Can you believe that? Mia says that she assumed that Liza must have felt some sort of relief knowing that her mother is gone. But through the interviews that you see in this section, through her friends and mentors and colleagues, you realize that her mother's passing was kind of like the launch of how she became her own self, and finally has the time to like figure out who she is, how she wants to be seen in the public, and what she wants to do with her life, really. So you actually find out that the frame of the whole film is actually going to be focusing on certain people that she met in the 70s that she has always like gave the credit that they invented her. And so we focus on these people that helped her launch her career within this decade and hence turn into the Liza that we know now. The first person that we get introduced to is Kate Thompson, who is her godmother. She was actually a music mentor to her mother, and then she ended up switching over to Liza. The moment when her mother passed away, she immediately flew in, helped out with all of the proceedings for the service, and basically kind of just, you know, took Liza under her wing and really helped her out. Through Kate Thompson, Liza was able to kind of see life larger than it is, you know, see it from a more like humorous, kooky perspective. They end up showing a really lovely clip between the two where Liza tells her that, you know, she's nervous, and Kay says that that's okay to feel a little nervous, and then she says, you can only do what you can do and no more, which I thought, yes, and I needed to hear that. It was just really lovely advice that you could give someone, truly. She also taught her to don't go around with people you don't like, which, you know, facts. Do we actually implement them? I don't know. There was someone, I can't remember if it was Michael Feinstein or Tim Caruso, but they mentioned that there was some bitterness on Kay's side. She was extremely talented, extremely musical, but she just never got to that point in her career as she thought she would, and instead she became a teacher. There was a little bit, not hostility, but I guess envy of watching all these people that she worked with when she's just as talented as them, if not more so, because she's teaching them how to be better. So there were moments where she did take the frustration out on Liza by saying, some snappy things here and there, but Liza still loved her to the end of the earth. Even during her final moments in life, Liza brought Kay in. She took care of everything. She made sure that she had the best care during her final days. Apparently, the last words that she ever said to Liza was, "Goodbye, darling, happy everything." Her friends mentioned in the interview that they believe that of all the people, she's the one that helped her become the superstar we know now. And what was really beautiful is that Liza actually created the show Liza at the Palace, brought it to Broadway in 2008, and she basically created this show to dedicate solely to Kay Thompson, which I thought was really beautiful to show Liza's true character and how she treats her friendships. It's really beautiful what we see in this film. Hi, editing me here. Completely forgot to also mention that Kay Thompson is the author of the Eloise books, which Eloise was also inspired by Liza during her time staying at the hotels with her mother when she was younger. So yeah, forgot to mention that. There you go. Cut to, we see an interview with Liza where she's reminiscing of a day when she went to the Ambassador's Theater to see a show. And at that show, she saw Charles Aznavour perform for the first time. And according to a friend, she said, "That's it. That's what I want to do." And so he became her mentor. He ended up becoming her lover as well, which was like, he was actually mentored by Edith Piaf, who was also a very well-known singer at the time. He was kind of known as the French Frank Sinatra. He really showed the embodiment of the greediness of life. He also was just very big on stage. Like, he understood how to use physicality to interpret a song. And Liza took his advice when it comes to interpretation and lyrics very seriously. She said that he was the biggest influence in her life, both personally and professionally, the one helping her find her own voice, and she was able to see a way of delivering a song that was closer to the heart. So it seems like as a whole, when it comes to like performing the song itself and understanding how to perform it in those big concert settings, it's very different compared to how you sing a song in a musical, for example. I think Charles helped her out how to make that transition fluid and also just more insight on how to tell a song through a story. The film then goes into her immense love of dance. She has been exposed by dance ever since she was born through her mother and her father. This is when we finally talk about her father, Vincent Minnelli, who was the acclaimed director. It's wild. They actually show a clip from the Ed Sullivan Show where he mispronounces his name, which is like, how can you mispronounce that name? He ends up saying Vincetti Minnelli, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's so cringy. Liza said that he inspired her with everything, especially in art. She always hung out at the studio growing up, but her favorite part of watching was when she was able to watch her father direct dance numbers, and she learned dancing through watching. She said that something about movement and choreography really thrilled her, and she just knew that she had to do it. She did have some ailments. She had scoliosis. One leg was a little bit longer than the other, but she still danced regardless of having those insecurities. And this is when we get introduced to Bob Fosse, who is the critically acclaimed Broadway director-choreographer. And they then discuss about him and his technique and why it's so unique and different. They go into talking about cabaret. Bob Fosse was not a part of the musical conception of it, but Liza was in the running for the part of Sally, but she lost it, unfortunately. I believe it was because Hal Prince wanted an English-speaking actor for the part, and even though Liza auditioned with a British dialect, Hal still said no. What's really funny is that they asked Liza why she wanted to do it, and Liza's like, I just wanted to sing the songs. Is that too simple of an answer for you? I love it. So when she got the movie, she went to have a meeting with Bob at the Waldorf. He kind of came off a little bit defensive at first, but thankfully they were able to click and have a really collaborative experience with each other. Liza wholeheartedly praises Bob despite, the ups and downs of their collaboration, especially on Cabaret. Bob Fosse was very much of a perfectionist, and another director that was also very much of a perfectionist was her father. So through watching him work with other people, she understood how to work with someone with that sort of dynamic. And I also think she learned some examples from other actors when they would interact with her father. For example, they give a story about Bob being really unhappy with what Liza was doing during filming, and he said, I want to see you in my office right now. And Liza said no, and he said, no, I want to see you right now. And she said, no, if I see you right now, you're going to say things that you're not going to be happy that you said later on, and then you're going to give me flowers. So we're going to talk about it tomorrow. And I just thought that was so I don't know. It was iconic. It kind of showed that, you know, she's able to stand her ground without at the same time like getting into the petty energy, if that makes sense. That could have easily went into that in that sort of scenario. It's very obvious that she knows how to handle high stress situations in a calm manner. They also discuss about how her father helped her figure out how to do the look for Sally Bowles, looking at people like Leah Deputy and Louise Brooks, because originally she thought that she had to dye her hair, and he was like, nah girl, you don't need to do that. Look at these people. You can easily figure it out. And while figuring out her look for Sally Bowles, this is when she meets Christina Smith, who made the big eyelashes that she wears in the film. And this was actually the beginning of their very long collaboration, having Christina be her makeup artist. So when it came to characterizing Liza's dancing, before Fosse, it was kind of very girly, quirkish, a little bit awkward per se. Someone says in the interview that her talent was kind of like all over the place. So when it came to working with Fosse, that brought discipline and focus to her dancing, which is why when you see her in Cabaret, it's so sharp, so small. It just feels really fluid and natural when she does it. And what's really lovely is that Fosse kind of took advantage of her quirkiness, which really kind of elevated the character of Sally as well. Of course, the film was a massive success. It put her name on the map, even though it already was. Basically, in a nutshell, 1972 was the biggest year for her because not only did Cabaret get released, but Liza with a Z also happened. So it was just like a massive like rocket ship of fame going up to the sky, and everyone was obsessed with her. Everyone wanted to be her. Everyone just wanted her. So basically, ever since Cabaret came out, she was not left alone for all of the 70s, basically. Also, mind you, they filmed Cabaret in 1971, was premiered in 1972. 1971 was 2 years after her mother passed, which I just think is absolutely mind-boggling that her mother passed in 1969, and then 2 years later, she ended up working on one of the most historical films in musical theater history and in film history. Wild. Time is wild. The film then kind of takes a pause from talking about her mentors and collaborators and focuses on her husbands and her relationships. As she said, she just wanted love like it was in the songs. She really wanted to be in love. She really wanted to have a loving partner. She really wanted to have a family. And she was with a lot of guys. She was with Baryshnikov. As I said earlier, she was with Charles Aznavour. She was with Martin Scorsese, Desi Arnaz Jr., Peter Sellers for a hot minute, which I didn't know about that. And what was really sweet is that we saw Ben Vereen talk about their relationship, and he was surprised with a home video of the two of them. And you see him watch and react to it, and it was just so lovely. And you know, he ends his interviews saying something along the lines of like, I think that's what you call love. I love Liza. And I was just like, oh my God. It's really beautiful how her friends talk about her in this film. It's really lovely. They do touch on each husband that she had. Her first husband was Peter Allen, and one of her friends did mention that this was probably the happiest time in her life when it comes to a relationship. She was very adamant that she did not know that he was gay, but regardless, they were friends until he passed away. Her second husband was Jack Haley Jr., which of course the press freaking loved and was obsessed over it because he is the son of the Tin Man. So of course the whole storyline of the son of the Tin Man falls in love with the daughter of Dorothy, a very nuanced, naive, beautiful, happily ever after kind of story arc, you know? And since they had similar childhoods, they had like a shorthand. I mean, granted, this is just from footage here and there, and we don't know the whole story, but they seemed like they had a really good relationship between them. They didn't say why they ended up divorcing. Her third husband, Mark Garrow, her friends say that he was probably the most solid husband. He wasn't in the business. He was a sculptor. And so I think because of that, as well as being solid and soulful, he had like a really good stability for her. And then finally they talk about her fourth husband, David Guest. No one liked him. They were like, yeah, that was a weird one. Michael Feinstein quotes Betty Davis saying, you should only speak good of the dead. David Guest is dead. Good. Despite of it all, she doesn't speak ill of anyone. Granted, they didn't show her say anything about David, but some of these relationships end up being lifelong friendships, like I said with Peter Allen earlier. So taking it back, many, many years ago, when Liza was 17, on a cloudy afternoon, she ended up showing up at the door of Candor and Ebb's studio. Liza doesn't say as to like how she found them, why she wanted to go and meet with them, like what inspired her to go and see them. But basically she walks in, she's like, do you have any songs that I can sing? And they were in the midst of working on Flora the Red Menace. And so they had her sing a few songs from that were in development, and they fell in love with her. They loved her energy, they loved her quirkiness, and she was very much embodying the role of Flora, so they gave her that role in the show. It ended up being a Tony Award winning performance for her, and thus began the collaboration between Kander and Ebb. But this one focuses mainly on Fred Ebb. So between the two, she was much closer to Fred. He said that she seemed to imitate others, and there wasn't really a style of her own, so he wanted her to be just her, which is terrific. And this is when I noticed that a lot of terrifics pop up. I did not realize how much Liza says terrific, which now looking back on Drag Race Snatch Games, I get it now. It was really interesting when they talked about Fred Ebb, because I think it seemed like he was someone that wanted to be a performer, but he wasn't able to be one. And so he kind of took his, dream of wanting to be one and the essence of his performance style. He brought that to Liza and kind of embodied that on Liza, like channeled aspects of him through her. What I found very surprising is that the first song that Kander and Ebb wrote for Liza was Liza with a Z. I also thought it was a very bizarre, full circle moment, because Liza was actually named after the Gershwin song Liza. I don't know, it just kind of popped into my head. I thought it was interesting. And what's interesting is that they show a clip of Fred Ebb singing Liza with a Z, and you see it compared with her singing the song as well in Liza with a Z, and you can see the similarities between the two. It was really interesting. What Liza really liked about Fred Ebb's lyrics is that it was very conversational. It feels like you are talking to someone. John Kander also discusses about his collaboration with him, and he said that they kind of just become one person when they work together. They very much took a godfather figure type to her, since they've known her since she was 17 years old. Fred also took on a big brother role. They were very personal and professional in their relationship. Fred was very comfortable to let Liza know if she was doing something wrong. He also helped her steer away from talking about her mom in her concerts, because instead of thinking about her, they're going to think about her mom. And we then shift into her relationship with her mom, mainly the difficult parts, especially when Liza was kind of becoming a performer on her own. The scenario that kind of started this difficult dynamic with them was when Liza sang at the Palladium with her mother for the first time, and she got such a huge reaction from the audience. They loved her. And because of that, Judy got pissed. And so you would see her later on in the concert that she would be shoving the mic in Liza's face, showing that she doesn't know how to sing in a mic properly, very much showing dominance over her daughter. Liza makes the comment that she was no longer singing with her mom, she was singing with Judy Garland. And you also see that Liza just got so frustrated with people constantly asking about her mother in interviews, because despite her mother passing and working on all of these shows where she's becoming her own person, they still ask about her mom. And I'm sure that must have gotten really freaking tiring. It's enough already. It's my mom was my mom, I am my own person. We're two different people. Why can't y'all not comprehend that? I think it's just because her mother was so big. More so the concept of her mother even, because everyone grew up with her because of the Wizard of Oz, that I think when she passed, everyone had such a deep personal loss. But I also wonder if people are trying to get one more glimpse of Judy Garland through her daughter. I think it's kind of gross. I think it's kind of disrespectful, even unfair. I'm sure that it got really tired really quick for Liza. They finished this section talking about how Liza was about to do a cabaret act and Judy was coming, and Liza was a ball of nerves knowing the fact that she was going to be there in the audience. And then after the show, Judy is giving her praise and whatnot, but then she says, "This is what we always wanted, isn't it, baby?" And apparently that just snapped something in Liza, and it just makes me think that hearing the word "we" just kind of made her go inside, enough is enough, I don't want to be a part of you anymore. So Fred Ebb was actually the one that created the idea of Liza with a Z. During that time, Liza was approached to do a TV program, and Fred Ebb had this idea of doing a concert program on television. It's never been done. He wanted Bob Fosse to direct it. And it was a huge risk because at that time it was very difficult for entertainers go from, live concerts, huge audiences, shifting over to television. Sometimes entertainers just don't read well on television. So they were taking a really big chance on this. They performed only for one night at the Lyceum Theater. It was the total package of presenting Liza in the best way possible. It was directed by Bob Fosse. There were additional songs written by John Kander and Fred Ebb, as well as other songs in the cycle. She was dressed in Halston to the nines. It was a massive hit and was also Emmy Award winning. It was such a huge success that there was even a newspaper article that came out after the program saying Judy's daughter returns as Liza. So it was really cool to see the world realize, okay, this is no longer her persona. Her persona is her own self. And just a reminder, Liza with a Z came out in 1972, same year as Cabaret. Huge year for her. And you can see in this section when talking about Fred Ebb, you could see how much Liza loved this man. And the way they ended this section is really touching. They showed a clip of Liza going off stage from a concert that she just had on her world tour, towel over her head, sweating like crazy, absolutely exhausted. You could see how low her energy is, that she just wants to collapse on a bed. And then you see them take a right in the hallway. She sees someone and she immediately jolts with energy and just runs down and says, "Freddie!" And it was Fred Ebb, and just ran into his arms, and it was just so, it was really sweet. You could see the amount of love this woman had for her friend. We then talk about her dynamic with celebrity and the public image and dealing with newspapers, the press, mostly in Europe, because in the 70s she did a world tour during that time after doing Liza with a Z and Cabaret. Everyone was basically obsessed with her and wanted more. Whenever they can get a picture, a video, an interview, they will do what they gotta do to get it. And Liza was really lucky with her upbringing because she knew exactly how to handle with the press. She knew how to give proper interviews. She knew how to deal with difficult questions. She was able to hold her ground very well. And some of the questions that the interviewers give her, it's just geez, crow. One of them asks her if she was pregnant, which is first off, no. And then the second one, they talk about, people are saying you're ugly. How do you feel about being called ugly? This is where I just don't understand about the press. Are you really grabbing at straws here? Come on now. I'm sure you can think of some other questions to ask instead of, is she pregnant, and do you hate that people call you ugly? A friend of hers also discussed about how, they were chatting and she said that she just came back from a party and he asked how it was and she said, oh, it's okay. They wanted her. When she means her, she means they want the persona, they want the big, larger than life, the Liza on stage that they knew and love. When, she just wanted to be the nice lady at a party and just, not be on all the time. She carries herself so well that it's no surprise that people would think that maybe this could be overwhelming and a massive burden for her, let alone, doing this world tour at the same time. And being on all the time is really tiring. It's a lot of work and it's so much to ask out of someone, At the same time though, being on stage for her was a safety zone. This was where she was the most comfortable. She loved her audience and she wanted her audience to love her back, which is kind of ironic in a way because that was very much of her mother, if you think about it. She really needed the audience there. That woman was so desperate for love that the place that she knew that she could always get it was through her audience. And I feel like Liza is the same way as well. It's just an interesting comparison to look at. What was really lovely about this film was meeting her friends and hearing how lovely they spoke about Liza and just hearing their backgrounds of how they met, how they all see Liza in the same light. She's so joyful, so larger than life, but at the same time, she is still a person. She has gone through so many personal tragedies in her life. And you also see that Liza is a ride or die friend. She will drop everything, whether or not if she's on tour, working on a film, or, across the country, she will drop everything if you say that something is wrong and you need help. She's also someone that can make anyone feel like they're the most important person in the world. One of her friends says that it's something about her looking at you, she makes you feel like there's no one else in the world but you. She genuinely wants to get to know you. She genuinely cares about you, even if you've met her for the first time. It's a really beautiful quality for someone to have. And then John Kander discusses the whole debacle with Chicago. Long story short, Gwen Verdon had to step out. She had to get surgery, and she was going to be out for 6 weeks, and they genuinely thought that they had to close the show due to ticket sales. But when they mentioned this to Liza, Liza immediately said, I'll do it. It's never been done before, having an understudy also be a superstar, very much on the same level as Gwen Verdon, but she said that she'll do it. She learned it in a week. The only caveat that she gave, though, was she wanted no press. The only sort of advertisement that she wanted was word of mouth and an announcement at the very beginning of the show. And she absolutely killed it. She was phenomenal. I'm also sure that it gave a different perspective to the story as well, because Minnelli was so much younger than Gwen Verdon. But once people found out that Liza Minnelli was in Chicago, it sold out in minutes. And Kander's words, not mine, he said she was fucking brilliant. I think you can find some of the archival footage of her rehearsing Chicago on YouTube. I could be wrong, but I think it's out there. Another great example just showing how much she cherishes friendships and how, you know, again, she'll do anything for her friends. Christina Smith mentions that Liza is the reason how she was able to get into the union, because originally she was rejected due to the fact that it was a mostly male business during that time, which, shocker. They also discuss about her tragedy of having 3 miscarriages and how deeply she wanted a family. She wanted a family so bad, but instead of having her own children and having a husband, she ended up becoming the additional family member in all of her friends' families. She became the godmother to a lot of her friends' children. It was so beautiful to see in this film of how much Liza loves and cares and respects her friends, and she gets the same love and care and respect back from her friends. She really truly surrounded herself with people who love and respect her. The last collaborator that they discuss in this film is Halston. Liza mentions how her father actually started in costume design, so she was around, you know, fashioning clothes a lot growing up, but it never really interested her until she realized that her clothing in concerts especially could be a part of the storytelling, and she also wanted to find her own unique look at that time in the 70s. Cut to Kay Thompson and her were walking past Bergdorf Goodman, and she saw a dress that she absolutely loved. Kay Thompson told her that it was made by Halston, and she said, let me introduce you. So they went right upstairs and they met. Halston was a major fashion icon in the 70s. He originally was a hat maker and became famous for making the pillbox hat for Jackie Kennedy, and then he shifted over to clothing after that. His designs were clean, simple, yet complex. He had this process of having the fabric speak to him. He would just drape a fabric on a mannequin and just have it stay there for days, and he would let the fabric tell him what the fabric should be made into. I know it sounds weird, but it kind of makes sense. He says in an interview clip, know yourself, know what suits your purpose to make you more attractive and comfortable. What I found really interesting in this section, not gonna lie, is that Michael Feinstein kind of makes a little bit of a dig to the Netflix TV series, I think, of Halston. I think, because he says that Halston was a down-to-earth, practical, funny man, and he has not seen that depicted recently. So I was like, ooh. They met when Liza was 19. He was able to create clothing that turned her insecurities and negatives into positives. He helped give her an entire sense of self. For example, she sweats a lot on stage, so that's why he decided to make all of her outfits in sequins, so you can't tell where the sweat like stops and starts. Her weight also fluctuated, so they ended up making about 2 to 4 of the same garment, depending on what size she is during the point of the tour. He helped Liza go from the little girl to the chicest woman in the world. They had a deep love and shared humor and irony of life together. They had a very brother-sister relationship, kind of similar to Fred Ebb. He also felt very parental towards her. And of course, since it's Halston, they also talked about Studio 54. What I found absolutely hilarious is that Liza was like, no one took drugs, which I'm like, maybe you didn't, but, Her friends say that it was more of like a cultural experience for her being at Studio 54 instead of the other things that we always hear about. People like Andy Warhol, Martha Graham, Truman Capote were there, so she was around a lot of very artistic people. So it sounds like she was more into the interactions with people instead of interacting with the drug use. They share a audio clip from Halston's memorial service where she said, I've never performed, have a party, or made any real important decisions years without my friend Halston. And she even says in the documentary that with Halston, it was heaven. The last thing that the film discusses was her addiction and going to rehab, which I found a little bit interesting just because it was so focused on the 70s that they decided to talk about this when it was more public in the 80s. Granted, she was dealing with these problems during her world tour in the 70s. She mentions that all of the bad stuff in her life prepared her for the rest of her life, and it also helped her understand more of herself. During the 70s, she was just go, go, go. She was very much a perfectionist like her father. She didn't want to show any sign of weakness or any sort of moment where she has to say, I can't do this. She never wanted to let anyone down. She was taking prescription drugs, but she didn't feel like it was a problem. She would always have like rum and cokes as well. She admitted that drinking did make her feel better for a minute, and knowing that can make things very tempting and also very difficult. She even told reporters that she was terrified of drugs. She admits that it was absolute denial. She's also known for vowing to never be like her mother until she realized that she was. You know, they discussed again how her mother was not easy to deal with, especially during the final years of her life, especially the moments where she tried to take her life. It was very public of what her mother was going through, to the point where she felt like she always had to defend her during those low moments. And it's also unfortunate looking back because her mother was so adamant that she was going to be sober and be a good mother to her daughter, but unfortunately she was an addict and she succumbed to her addictions. And despite the tempestuous relationship that they had between each other, whenever Liza sees a video of her mother, like, she just melts and glows. Her friends can see how much she loved her mother. And Liza still speaks very highly of her mother despite all of the low moments that they've had together. Liza mentions that she learned about sobriety through Fred. Fred actually mentioned that she could see that she was getting fuzzy on stage. She mentioned that she was feeling really stressed during the tour, so people would say, have a drink, it'll make you feel better, and she definitely took advantage of that. She then did admit herself to the Betty Ford Clinic. I think that was in the mid-80s at that point. What was really lovely with her compared to other celebrities is that she didn't run away from her struggles. She was very public about it. She was very much wanting to be a spokesperson so that other people don't feel alone, because asking for help, especially for something like addiction, is really embarrassing and very vulnerable. And kind of admitting that you have an addiction is, you know, some people might feel like that's a failure, when in reality that's the first step to becoming yourself again. And of course, people made comments that she was following her mother's footsteps, but at the same time, it's like she wasn't. Yes, she was an addict. Yes, addiction can run in families, but her mother's experience is completely different from Liza's, and the main difference between the two of them is that Liza wasn't afraid to talk about it. She was very open about it. She was very vulnerable about it. You also just can't compare addiction at all. Like, it's very unique from person to person. So by the end of the 70s, Liza Minnelli became a Tony Award-winning, Emmy Award-winning, Oscar Award-winning superstar. She could have died like her mother, but she didn't. It ends with the image of the red sequins, but instead of it insinuating her mother, i.e. Judy Garland, i.e. Dorothy in the ruby red slippers, it's actually in relation to her sequins, working with Halston and being a performer. We then see her sing The World Goes Round by Candor and Ebb, which I believe she has mentioned in the A&E biography that was her anthem. That's how that documentary ended as well, with her singing that song. And the film ends with a film and photo montage of Liza with the audio clip of a reporter stating, "Can you think of a star who's managed to equal a famous parent? Well, one who did is Liza Minnelli, the daughter of a superstar Judy Garland and Academy Award-winning film director Vincent Minnelli. Liza has become a superstar on her own." Now, after watching the documentary, I did find an interview with the director, Bruce David Klein. I found it on YouTube. The title of the video stated that Liza was the first Nepo baby, which, okay. The hosts of the shows were obviously not full-on Liza fans. They only knew her through her film work, mainly Arthur and Cabaret. And you clock this very early on because one of the interviewers was like, "That's an amazing title. Where'd you get it from?" And you're like, "You say you're a Liza fan? Okay, But despite the interviewers not really knowing much about her, Bruce did give a lot of fun insight about the process of the film. He said that the process was really fast. He gave the premise that he wanted to discuss in the film, like how Liza became Liza, like the Liza that we know today, and that really intrigued them. And through the interviews and footage, they realized that when it came to the framework, it should be focusing on like the collaborators and mentors that she worked with. He also talks about how there was a really sweet, vulnerable moment with Liza where she said, "Don't make me look like a phony." And also they do talk about the Nepo baby stuff with this analogy of like, if you're born into privilege, you're already on third base. But he said that like having that pressure of being the daughter of two superstars, getting from third base to home is just as difficult starting from first base, which I do agree to an extent. However, I do have to say, like, at the end of the day, like, she is coming from immense privilege. And so when it came to making these connections, it wasn't like a difficult thing for her. She had like that door open, even though I know in the A&E documentary, like, she was very adamant that like she didn't want any help from anyone. Having her parents be her parents, that definitely was like, that helped. So some final thoughts that I had about the film. All in all, I thought it was really lovely, really beautiful work. I thought Bruce did an amazing job. The one thing I found very surprising is that since they talked about her drug use and that went into the 80s, I was surprised that they did not talk about her father passing away. I'm assuming they didn't discuss it just because of the time frame that they were mainly focusing on, which I understand. And this is in no way of saying, oh, she prefers her mother over her father. I mean, of all the people, I think she preferred her father over her mother. Like, she would not stop gushing how much she adored that man in like any interview that you see her give. And I also think that since she was at the lowest point in her life when her father passed, it probably was unbearable for her. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the things that triggered her to go to rehab. Granted, I don't know the timeline when it came to her getting help and her father passing away. Her half-brother, Joey Luft, was not in this. I don't know if there's like tea behind that, but I highly doubt it. I thought this film, which I am totally stealing from Bruce from that interview, is that it was a really great example of the power of mentors and how it's okay to ask for help, that you can lean and grow from others. She's a great example. She asked for help and her life was just transformed. And just one more thing about the Nepo baby stuff. Yes, she has her father and mother who are superstars, but at the same time, she did make her mark without using that tagline, "I'm Judy Garland's daughter." Does that make sense? The one thing that did make me sad was just like seeing how much her health has deteriorated. I think she only stands once in the interview footage that they get. It also reminded me of when she was on RuPaul's Drag Race recently, being honored and being in that big luscious throne and everything with all those boys dancing around her, which was so iconic and absolutely fabulous. And you could see that she was having a lovely time. My camera died. It's a different day now. Anyways, this documentary kept making me think about this interview that she gave for People magazine a year ago, where she emphasizes and urges people to really take care of their body because it might last longer than you expected. But at the same time, she still has a very joyful, positive view and jokes that she's, you know, replacing parts but still moving forward. So all in all, it was really beautiful to see a documentary that really captures her essence, her joy, her beauty, her talent and soul, because at the end of the day, she truly is terrific. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really hope you liked this video. I had a lot of fun watching this documentary and, you know, sharing my thoughts. If you like this video, please give it a like. It really helps me out. Let me know in the comments if you've seen this documentary, if you're interested in checking it out. If you have any facts about Liza that I didn't include, please add them down below as well. I always love hearing more information about her and just hearing other people's thoughts about theater in general. And if you are liking this video as well as other videos that I've been making, please consider subscribing. It would be lovely to have you. May you be happy, healthy, safe and at ease and free from harm, and I will see you in the next one.